The parable of the persistent widow and the unjust judge is only found in Luke's account of the life and ministry of Jesus. Luke's gospel seems to pay special attention to social inequities that are all too often taken for granted. In this parable, Jesus taught about the importance of persistent prayerfulness, as demonstrated by the opening sentence, which reads, "Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart." Their need to pray always and not to lose heart. And then at the end of the parable, Jesus contrasted the heart of God toward those who seek justice with the callous attitude of the unjust judge toward the widow, and said, "Will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" I read that. Read it again. And you know me. I have to think. So I have to ponder this. Jesus declared that God will quickly grant justice. To his chosen ones who cry to him day and night. I read that. Brother, I read that, okay? Sisters, I read that. God will quickly grant justice to his chosen ones who cried to him day and night. May I confess something to you? Or as Joan Rivers used to say, can we talk? That statement is not easy for me to swallow. It's not easy to swallow if you are a person who has suffered injustice. Day after day after day after day after day after month after month after month after year after year after year after year after decade after decade after decade after decade after generation. That statement, God will quickly grant justice. Now, it's in every one of my bootleg copies of the Bible, okay? Both the paper and the electronic version. And so I cannot conclude, Minister Levante, it's a misprint. I can't conclude, Sister Cindy, it's a misprint. I can't conclude, Carl, it's a misprint. But I see it and I think, whoa. How do I deal with that statement? How does the family of Atashiana Jefferson in Fort Worth, Texas, the families of Bradley Blackshire and Bobby Moore in Little Rock, the families of so many other families of black and brown and unwealthy victims of state-sanctioned homicide by law enforcement officers, find that statement anything but hard to believe? How do the families of people who have been wrongfully incarcerated and who've been trying day after day after week after week after month after month after year after generation to get righteousness read that statement, God will quickly grant justice? There's nothing new about injustice. And there is nothing new about unjust officials who turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to victims of injustice. Like us, the people of Palestine knew about unjust officials. They were a colonized people. They lived under the boot of the Roman Empire. The Roman soldiers they saw were alien occupiers, much like the police people see today, who don't live in the cities where they police, but come into town and begin to wear the uniform so they can patrol and control. Like us, Jesus knew about injustice firsthand. Before he was 2 years old, Jesus had been marked for death by a corrupt puppet king named Herod. Jesus was profiled before he was 2. Okay? As a matter of fact, when you read the text of the slaughter of the innocents, you're reading about the slaughter of profiled boys who were Hebrew below the age of 2. Jesus knew about being unable to trust the local police, the local politicians, the local judges for deliverance from oppression. Jesus knew that the people he was talking to knew all this. And Jesus knew that his people had been waiting and praying for deliverance from Roman occupation for a long time. Well, let me check that. They had actually been praying and waiting a long time for deliverance from foreign oppressors. Before Palestine was invaded and ruled by the Romans, it was ruled by the Greeks under Alexander the Great. Before Alexander the Great, it was ruled by the Persians. Before the Persians, it was ruled by the Assyrians. The people who heard Jesus deliver this parable talk about God will quickly grant justice had been waiting and praying for centuries. For centuries for deliverance from foreign oppressors. So, what did Jesus mean when he declared that God would grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night, and that God would quickly grant justice to them? God, according to Jesus, is not like the unjust judge in the parable who refused to grant relief to the oppressed widow until he got tired of her coming to him. If God is not like that unjust judge, then what did Jesus mean? If Jesus meant that we'll get faster relief from injustice than the widow got in this parable, we have a problem, because according to this parable, the widow got justice in her lifetime. As one of my wife's relatives said to me last night during the family gathering, our people have been dealing with oppressive treatment for 400 years. Actually, you have to understand the context. We were talking about something, and he said a lady who looked unlike him said to him, "Am I in your way?" And he said to her, "You've been in my way for 400 years." I did not give you the whole. I gave you the cleaned up version, okay? Because we were having a family gathering, and we were just you know how it is when you got family food and stuff like that, but he and I got that kind of relationship so we can be straight with each other. I will not accuse people of not having faith if they act somewhat impatient with God. I will not accuse people of not having faith if they act as if they say, "God, why are you taking so long?" If Jesus said you will grant justice quickly, I will not accuse people of saying, "Look, Lord, we sure wish your quick would come in after a while, because your quick has taken a little bit too longer than us to get quick." However, I would ask that we ponder what Jesus said and think of it in the context of two other words, P and R, persistence and resistance. And think of this persistence and resistance and quick from the notion of the title of this sermon, which is the propriety of pushy faith. Pushy faith. By pushy faith, I mean faith that inspires people to believe in liberation despite long-standing opposition and injustice and oppression. Pushy faith believes that there can be something called liberty and justice for all, even though we haven't ever seen it. And pushy faith says we can continue to demand it, even though we haven't seen it. And pushy faith says we can continue to demand it and expect it to show up, even though folks don't want it to happen. Pushy faith. Pushy faith believes that God is just and working to overcome oppression and injustice, and that faithful people will keep working and praying and protesting across days, across months, across years, across generations, even across centuries, because God is just going to give justice. Pushy faith refuses to quit. Refuses to quit protesting. Refuses to quit praying. Refuses to quit showing up. Refuses to quit resisting. Refuses to quit demanding. Refuses to quit believing in justice. And pushy faith operates from a notion of propriety that is different from the faith of oppressors. You know, oppressors can expect and set up rules for propriety. Oppressors can insist on you showing up by appointment during regular hours when they want to be able to say how long you stay and what you say and how you say it. But pushy faith believes that unjust officials are simply more reasons to show up louder than they want to hear in ways they don't find proper. Pushy faith shows up in disruptive ways. Pushy faith creates holy disorder that interrupts the order of injustice. You understand, injustice has an order to it. I have never known an unjust prison not to have a schedule. I don't care how unjust the prison is, I don't care how unjust the system is, it has a schedule to it. There was a schedule to every injustice that you can think of. Those of us who recall the schedule of Jim Crow understood that Jim Crow had a schedule. And here was the schedule. The schedule of Jim Crow was that if you went to a white establishment, you showed up at the back. If you went to the black establishment and you were white, you showed up wherever you want to. It was the schedule of injustice. And nobody who was in charge of Jim Crow arrested white folks for going in the front door of black establishment. I 10 times double dog dare you to show arrest records of folks who got arrested for white folks sitting in black restaurants. It didn't happen because the schedule of injustice does not allow for unjust situations to operate different from the schedule of that injustice. But when black folks showed up at all white lunch counters, the schedule was disrupted. And the schedule of injustice has to be disrupted if people are to live with pushy faith. I hope somebody's listening to me. You cannot expect Pharaoh to give you justice on Pharaoh's schedule. There is something about being pushy that requires that you not be proper. I don't think you heard me. There is something that requires you to be pushy that cannot allow you to be proper. Pushy faith creates holy dis-ease that disturbs the ease and the complacency of people who have become addicted to oppression or complicit with it. See, some people are addicted to oppression. They have gotten so much benefits from oppression that they are addicted to it. They cannot imagine life without the benefits of oppression. And then other people have simply gotten complicit in it. They have just decided, I can't think of a life outside this, so I'm going to go along to get along. Jesus taught in this parable that really is about prayer, that prayer is ultimately based on pushy faith. But this parable is not just about prayer. It is also a parable about justice. Don't read this parable so narrowly that you only read it as a parable about prayer. It is a parable about justice because Jesus said this was a widow who needed justice, who wanted justice, who deserved justice, and she dealt with an unjust judge, a judge who recognized she had a claim to justice. But she didn't get it because she had a claim to it. She didn't get it because she had a right to it. She didn't get it because the judge agreed with her. She didn't get it because she was on time. She got it because she just persisted. Still, she persisted. Day after day, she persisted. In my mind, she showed up at the judge's house outside of court hours. In my mind, when the judge's wife was going to the supermarket and the judge was with her, she showed up at the judge and said, Judge, you recall I was in the court and you wasn't listening to me, but I see you at the supermarket. And the judge's wife wondered, why is this woman worrying me? In my mind, she showed up when the judge did not expect her. She showed up in ways the judge didn't want to see. She showed up hoping that she would show up, and the judge would get so tired of seeing her that the judge would do as Jesus said in his text, I don't fear God, I don't care what folks think about me, but I want this woman to get out of my face. I am tired of this woman. Now, those of us who are parents know about this. If you have been a parent, you know that eventually you get tired of this child worrying you about something. You know that it's not something that the child doesn't have a right to have. It's just that you don't plan to give a child this today, and you want the child to wait for it, and you want to teach the child something, but the child keeps worrying you. And it's not that you're mean to the child, it's that you want to, well, you just don't want to give the child this today. You have something else on your mind. You have something else on your schedule. You have other plans for your time and your money. You did not intend to do this today, but this child does not care about your schedule. Worrying you. Company show up, this child come in your face. Worrying you. You work it all day and you're tired and you don't want to think about it, and this child comes in worrying you. You may not have been through that kind of situation. You tell the child, if you don't get out of my face, I'm going to give you a whipping. And the child leaves, and 5 minutes later, Mama, I'll think about it later. Is it later yet, Mama? Pushy faith. Notice the pushy faith of this child in this example. The pushy faith of the child. The child somehow believes that there is something effective in the pushiness. If you ask the child to explain why the child believes that, the child cannot explain it to you. The child cannot break it down to you analytically, but the child somehow understands that somewhere in the universe there is a rule that says that you can wear somebody out. The child has not been to the ocean, but somehow the child understands the same thing the ocean understands about mountains. Even though mountains have existed a long time, oceans can wear out mountains if they keep lapping away at the mountain with the waves. Jesus taught that prayer and ultimately justice is based on pushy faith. Prayer and justice are not based on the notion that we're going to get microwave solutions from long-standing problems. Injustice has been around a long time. If you expect a microwave solution to injustice, you're expecting something that had never happened. First of all, unjust situations don't just pop up. They evolve. They build. They arise. They are layered on stuff. And prayer and justice are based on the notion that God is working above the scenes. I hope you heard me. That God is working above the scenes and behind the scenes that we see. Above the scenes, God is working. And behind the scenes, God is working. On the scenes. Pushy faith believes that God is working on us and with us as we're working on other people and with others. I wonder what we would be like if we were like that widow. What would the world look like if the folks who call ourselves followers of Jesus looked like if we were like the widow? Let me suggest a few options. First of all, we'd be noisy. We'd be noisy. We would be making noise. We would be disturbing the peace. You understand? The widow disturbed the judge's peace. We would be making noise. Pushy faith is noisy faith. We would be unsettling things. Pushy faith is unsettling faith. We would be stopping stuff that's moving, not because we don't like movement, but because we believe that if we stop enough stuff that's moving, the disruption of the movement will cause folks to notice that we're doing something to bring attention to the injustice. You understand? If you stop enough traffic enough days because you believe in the injustice of something that you're protesting, eventually folks who are in traffic going to say, I sure wish these folks would stop stopping traffic during rush hour. And please do what they want to do so we can get on with our business. Understand that the judge did not give the widow justice because the judge wanted her to have justice. The judge did not give the widow justice because the judge believed in God. The judge did not care about God. The judge did not care about people. The judge cared about convenience. And one of the lessons Jesus is teaching here is about the imperative of inconveniencing folks in order to get justice. So I would suggest that if we were really like the widow, we would be inconveniencing some folks. We would be disturbing some people. Pushy faith sits down in restaurants whose owners have sworn to never serve your people and say, okay, we're going to sit down here, and we're going to stay here, and we're going to sit here, and we're going to wait for you to take our order. And we're not going to leave. Oh, by the way, nobody else can get our seat either. Are you going to arrest us? Okay, we got some more people going to show up. And they're going to say, serve us. And you're going to spend all day, every day, worrying about when we're going to show up. Please don't think that everybody wanted to see black folks in restaurants and serving black folks now. No. They just got tired of black folks showing up. Taking orders. And they got tired of white folks saying, will you please make sure that the restaurant is open? Because you've been closing the restaurant because you're afraid of the black folks showing up. Keep the restaurant open. We don't mind sitting with the black folks. We want to eat. And some restaurants got open and said, listen, we will serve black folks and white folks. Come on, eat. Well, guess what? The folks who got restaurants open serving everybody got everybody's business, and the folks who said, we only serving white folks got lost business, and the folks who got lost business, wait a minute, we can't afford to lose business. We don't care about justice. We just want business. But they changed because of pushy faith. Pushy faith. Pushy faith continues to demand service from bakers and photographers who hold business licenses from the public, but yet refuse to serve public people who are LGBTQI. How are you going to get a license from the state but not serve everybody in the state who wants to get the business? So pushy faith says to people, look here, we're going to keep showing up, and we're going to show up with our LGBTQ friends. And we're going to say, listen, we want you to do a cake for their wedding. And by the way, if you don't do a cake for our wedding, you're not going to do a cake for our wedding either. Pushy faith. Pushy faith continues to work for peace and demand justice, even though nations increase funding for war making. If enough folks said, hey, we're getting tired of you increasing the budget for the military, but you want to increase the budget for the schools, guess what? We could do some stuff. And Jesus says that pushy faith is the faith that God deserves. Not because God is like the unjust judge, but because God is more faithful. God is going to do right. Yet God cannot do right in the lives of people who will not live and act as if we expect God to do right because we refuse to put up with wrong. Persistent faith. It's persistent faith, but it's also resistant faith. Pushy faith resists. It resists, first of all, the temptation to resign itself to injustice. When I was in the military, one of the first things we learned was if you're ever in the military and you're in a combat situation, there is a very real risk that you may get captured by an enemy. And the first lesson we're taught, you have to go through an escape and evasion class. And the first lesson you learn is, number one, you don't want to get captured. Because bad things happen to you if you get captured. And so they put us through stuff after you got captured that you don't want to have to remember. I mean, it's horrible stuff. Horrible stuff. You don't want to get captured. But the second thing was, when you get captured, you don't want to get comfortable. You don't want to get comfortable being a captive. You don't want to get comfortable with the schedule of the captivity. You don't want to get comfortable knowing the jail. You may have good relationships with your captor, but always remember you are a captive waiting for a chance to escape. And you are constantly looking for every chance you get to escape. You're constantly using all of your faculties to see all the options for it. You're checking the schedule, recognizing, hey, this is the best time to break out. This is the best person to break out on, and this is the best way out. Because you are resisting captivity. Where you going with this, preacher? I suggested one of the things that this widow taught was she resisted her captivity and oppression. And one of the problems of those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus is we're too quick to become complicit with, to resign ourselves to the captivity of oppression. Joan Rivers, again, can we talk? Can we talk? How is it that we have so many folks who say they are followers of Jesus who never find it possible to get in trouble fighting injustice? Martin Luther King Jr. went to jail fighting injustice, and I'm old enough to remember that there were black preachers, I said black preachers, who said, I don't want to be with King because he's going to jail. King got put out of the biggest black Baptist denomination because Joseph Jackson, the head of the denomination, said it was wrong for a preacher to go to jail. Excuse me, Jesus went to jail. John the Baptist went to jail. Paul went to jail. All of Paul's epistles were written from jail. Paul died in jail. Joseph was in jail. Hello. Jeremiah was in jail. How is it that we who follow Jesus never want to get in trouble? I suggest it's because we become comfortable being captives. The widow refused to allow the judge to get comfortable because she wasn't comfortable. If I'm going to be uncomfortable, Jack, you're going to be uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm not comfortable in my oppression. Guess what? You're not going to be comfortable co-signing on my oppression. Pushy faith works. Pushy faith works. Pushy faith is the only faith that works. James says faith without works is. Pushy faith works because it lasts and outlasts. It resists and persists against every oppressor and every oppression, against every unjust actor and every injustice, against every unjust power and all unjust powers. And pushy faith is constantly looking for a way, to find a way, to break the chain of injustice. And so let it be said of us that we are like the widow in this parable. We're people of pushy faith. Let it be said of us that we are persistent resistors as opposed to complicit captives. Let it be said of us that we are holy nuisances, that they get tired of us coming. Let it be said of us that when we show up, we go act up. And we act up in ways they hadn't planned. And we act up and we don't care what they think about it. Let it be said that we act up because we are not going to live according to the rules of their propriety. Because you said their propriety says you got to be complicit with the injustice. No, we're not being proper. Let it be said of us that we believe God is worthy of our pushiness. God is worthy of our persistence. God is worthy of our relentlessness. God is worthy of our noisiness. God is worthy of us acting up. God is worthy of us acting like that child who says, "Is it time yet?" Let us pray like we're pushy. And then let's push because we're prayerful. Let's push because we're prayerful, because we believe that God is pushing with us. Let us push because we know that God is pushing with us and we're pushing with God, and with God and us, we already have a majority, but we have to act like we know that God is pushing with us so we can push as if we know that the pushers against whom we're pushing cannot beat us. When we act like that, we'll act like we believe in prayer. When we act like that, we'll act like we believe in God. When we act like that, judges will do right, not because they believe it's right or because they care about God, because they want to get us out of their face. Amen.
I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. forever.